name is Peter Alachi. Tonight my guest is Susan DameGreene. Susan, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Let me read your biography quickly here to
Okay.
the people so they can get an idea who you are. Now, Susan, I met Susan about 2 weeks ago maybe
Yeah.
at SATV, but we've been talking about doing the program with you for a long time. Now, you're a certified past life regression therapist,
That's right.
and your practice is right here in Salem, Mass, at the post office, second floor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me something about what you do exactly.
Well, in 1989, I had 2 teenage children. They were driving me crazy. And so I wanted to get away for the weekend. And I'm a Unitarian Universalist, so Rowe Camp and Conference Center is very familiar to me. So I called them up and said, listen, can I come and work for a weekend and get away from my kids? And they said, can you get a ride? Yes. So I went up there, and there were 2 seminars going on, one on yoga. If you look at me, you see I'm not a yoga person. And the other was on past life regression. So I walked into the past life regression one. And I realized I was in the wrong place because everybody there was a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a licensed social worker, and I was not. So I walked over to Roger and I said, I really want to stay, but I don't belong here. Can I stay? And Roger looked at me and he said, yeah, you're going to be fine. And that started a friendship that lasted until he died in 2011.
I did notice a lot of people who practice this are actually medical doctors and psychiatrists.
That's right. That's right. The type of past life regression I do is licensed in Europe. Roger was from England. He had a PhD as a psychologist from Oxford. Then he went to the Jung Institute and studied there and became a Jungian analyst.
Mm-hmm.
So he had both degrees, but he was based in Europe. And this is very popular in Europe as a therapy. And it is something that's accepted and something that is done and is covered by insurance. All over Europe, all over Brazil, Asia. He traveled all over the world, and I traveled quite a bit with him when he was traveling. Whenever he'd do something in a wonderful new place, I'd go. Yeah. And so he and I got to be friends, and finally, around 2007-08, he said to me, you know, you really ought to start thinking about doing this. You've been doing it since '89 with me. How much longer do you think I'm going to be alive? And so I said, okay, that's fine. And so I started the actual training, which is in England. And the reason I went to England for the training was because there you train with other psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, people who actually use this in their work. Mm-hmm. And then I had to get a degree in counseling in order to do this. So I went back to school and got a counseling degree. And you're never too old to go back to college.
Never too old.
I had a great time. It was really fun.
You mentioned to me earlier that everyone who's been alive today has had past lives.
That's absolutely right.
So.
Absolutely right.
Okay.
As Neil deGrasse Tyson talks
yes.
about it, and Carl Sagan used to talk
yes.
about it, we're all material that came from the stars because that's what started out.
We're all stardust.
Yes, we're all stardust. We're also all the earth, too. But the short scoop is people have one life, and you learn from it. I know that the traditional view, especially the Christian view, is that you have a life and then you go to heaven. Or you go to hell. Well, that's one way of looking at it, and I'm not telling you anything more than my way of looking at it. My way of looking at it is very much a Buddhist way of looking at it, because Roger also studied with the Buddhist monks. And he thought, and this is where he differs from Brian Weiss. Brian Weiss has made past life regression very, very popular all over the United States. And he does many, many classes, and he'll do 1,000 people at a time, and he'll regress them. And that's wonderful. The part that he misses is after you finish with the life. Roger then taught me, and taught all the people he taught, to take people to the space between lives. Catholics probably would call it purgatory. The Buddhists call it, or the Tibetans call it, the Bardo. It's the space between lives. It is heaven, if you want to call it that. You go there, you meet with all the people that you've traveled with before, because you travel with the same soul group.
Do you have the same memory as you had when you were alive? Do you have the same experiences in your mind when
you actually carry all the lives with you, and you meet with the people who've traveled through all those lives with you.
Including people you don't like?
Yes, unfortunately. There are always people that we just love and people that love us, and there's always people who are going to be the antithesis of what we'd like to see. They're always going to be there. The part that we do that's cathartic, because this is cathartic healing, is when you were a little kid, someone abused you.
Yes.
So when you finish that life and we go to the Bardo, you confront that person. That's where I take charge. During your lifetime, it's your lifetime. I simply move you forward in the lifetime. So you can then get to your death and die. And dying, as I said, is not the painful part. I've been with, through my plan giving work, 32 years, I've been with many, many people as they die. And death is really just taking that last breath in or out. And then the spirit comes out of the body. And I tell you, look down and see your body after you've died here. And you can look down and you can actually see what you look like.
So this is like the near-death experiences when people...
Except that this is their past life.
This is their real past life.
Their real past life. So then once they come out of the body and look down and see it, I turn them and take them to the Bardo, where someone who really loves them comes to get them. Who's died? Who's closest to you? Who do you miss the most?
Recently, my grandmother is the last one to die, but also this is mom passed away about 2 months ago now.
Oh, I'm so
February.
sorry.
And and we do miss her. I
Yeah,
have to say.
okay.
We
So
miss her.
when you go to this past life, very likely when you look to the Bardo, who's going to be coming for you is your wife's mom or your grandmother or both of them. I had a woman here on Saturday, last Saturday, who is from India, and both her grandmothers, her mother's mother and her father's mother, came down together. And she was like, people cry so much here. You can see I keep tissue boxes everywhere. I keep them right here. I buy tissues by the case because it's almost de rigueur that you cry.
Now, do you have to have specific personality to be able to actually exit your body and see yourself?
No, no, no. Everybody can do it. I have had one person since 1989 who couldn't do it. So, and I do people all the time. This has been my regular work. It'll be 4 years this fall.
So it's part of it is hypnosis.
No, 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 no. I don't do hypnosis like Brian Weiss does.
But how do you bring him then to that level then?
Well, what I do is I get them to relax. When they come in, I see if they're nervous or see if they're tense, and I just kind of talk to them and I tell me what, what's going on with you and how you feel about this. And I give them the rain stick, and the rain stick,
The sound.
the sound. It just helps them relax. That's really what it's for. It's to help you relax. And it's just a piece of cactus with the spines. When the cactus is still fresh, they cut the spines off and push them inside. And then they take the seeds and put that inside and put a plug on either end. And it's just to help people relax.
Now, people who come to see you and undergo the experience, do they come back again? Do they have different experiences the following time?
Yes. Once they get to the Bardo and meet everybody, then I bring them back here because they do need to come back here. I need to send them home. The Bardo is eternity. Eternity is not endless time. It's without time. And I show them how they can go back there. Many, many people come back a second time, a third time. I have some people who are regular clients. I have an awful lot of people who come in October, and they're coming for this, see Halloween in Salem, and what they do, and I just rub them on makeup on. What they do is make an appointment and come, and then they keep coming back every year. So I have a young woman from Los Angeles who had a man that she'd been dating, and she just had this dark feeling about him. And she broke up with him because she had the dark feeling. And she called me the day she broke up. She said, I'm coming to Salem. And she's the one who taught me about Airbnb. She got a cheap flight out of LA to Boston, got in a Uber, Uber.
Sure.
This young girl comes up to Boston, comes up to Salem, gets an Airbnb. Who knew? I didn't know anything about that.
Oh, yeah.
And came here. And she lay down, and this man had killed her in the past life. He had strangled her around 1700. And this was the one woman who I couldn't keep in the one life. She kept dashing from that life to the next life, and that man had run her over with a car in Salem in that past life too. So she had 2 past lives in Salem.
And both of them.
Both of them
same guy.
ended with the same guy killing her. So I said, you may want to stay broken up with this man, and then I send her home. But she comes every year now. And every year when she comes, it's a different one. I have a man who's a former Marine who I was sure his wife had booked the appointments. because it came in as 2 appointments, husband and wife, and it's usually the wife who does it. And the guy comes, and he's this big, hulking Marine. I get up the stairs, and he's here early, sitting on the chair. He's got a Marine cap on, and he's got this Marine jacket, and you know he's a retired Marine, and he hasn't left it behind. He's sitting there like this. And I think, I'm never going to be able to regress this guy. And he comes in, and he takes off his jacket, and he hangs it up, and he's got a Marine shirt on. Well, it turns out he got out of the Marines and became a nurse practitioner, and he runs the program, the nurse practitioner program for cystic fibrosis in New Jersey. So he's a high-level guy. And he sits there, and and I'm thinking, oh, God, how am I going to do this? He's never even going to believe it happens. And he says, I was in Vietnam. And I said, oh, my goodness, because he's not that old. He said, I was one of the first people in Vietnam. So he starts telling me about Vietnam. So I listened a little bit. I said, okay, great. I tell you, I think you're probably going to go back to Vietnam, because that's the memory you brought up right away. He lays down, he goes back to Vietnam, and he's in the 17th century in Vietnam, and he's a Vietnamese woman being tortured.
Huh.
And he comes back, and I'm thinking, he's never going to believe that happened. And he goes, I knew that was going to happen.
So do they sometimes see the actual image of the village they were in and the people they interacted with, and they were all Vietnamese in this case?
Yes, yes. He actually went through the whole life. He was a young Vietnamese girl, and his father, her father, sold him to this man when she was about 13, because it's 1700s, things were different. And he sold her to be a wife. And she was a wife to work in the fields and do things with, and he was very cruel to her. He had a lot of money, but he wasn't very nice to her. And she was tortured on a regular basis. And after a while, she figured out how to run away, and she ran away, and she ran back to her family. And her father, because it was a different time period and life was different, he said, I sold you. I can't take you back home. You got to go back to that man. And as she's walking back to go back to this man who's been so cruel to her and tortured her, she leaps off a bridge and kills herself. So yes, people can, they see it, but not in the way, it's not like a movie, it's not like this. They see it in their own way. Some people can actually bring up colors and pictures and names and know where they are, and really date the piece and give you the whole detail, and other people just have this feeling, and they just know. And so it depends on the person. Everyone goes back, though. Everyone goes and finds the life.
So how early, what's the earliest time you've had a client go back to, like time of Jesus maybe? Has that happened before?
Actually, I did have someone go back, and she was not a disciple, but she was one of the followers. She was a man, and she was a follower of Jesus. And
did she describe Jesus, how he looked like?
oh yeah,
Did she really? How did he look like?
She did. Much different than we think of him, because at that time everybody had beards. And in most modern recreations, he doesn't have a beard, And
He does. In modern recreations?
Some of them he does, but some of them he doesn't. And then she talked about what he was really like, and that Jesus was love, and he was a very highly evolved person, and he had just attracted people to him. He had that charisma.
Charismatic, yeah.
And people wanted to be with him. They just wanted. This kid was like a teenager, and he kind of ran away from home and was following them around. And there were a lot of people like that following him around. And some Roman soldier was walking down the road and said something derogatory about Christ, and this kid went up and started an argument with him, and the Roman soldier just killed him right there. And so, that happens. But the earliest one I had was a woman who came. She's 65 years old. She's just getting ready to retire. She has worked for 40 years at a Toyota plant in Kentucky. Think of a woman, engineer, in a Toyota plant in the South. She's gotten more heat than you can possibly imagine. Anyway, she comes in and she says, I just had back surgery. I said, okay, so I'll be very careful not to touch your back, because I do touch them quite frequently. I'll touch their knee, or quite frequently when I say, young man, tell me more, and put my hand on their shoulder. And I check with that with people first. Anyone who doesn't want to be touched, I don't. But she went back, and she was in a prehistoric life, and she was a young girl in a little village, and the man who was in charge of the village, she recognized as her current boss. because we travel with the same soul
So
group
prehistoric meaning prior to the written history?
prior to written history.
So to 10,000.
I don't know, but she said, we're wearing animal skin,
Okay.
and we don't have clothes on. There's no such thing. We don't really have a language. We have some rudiments of a language. But the way she described it, it seemed to me that it was very, very, very long time ago. At any rate, this man who was in charge of the village is the man in charge of her division where she works now. She recognized him. And he was supposed to be watching the children and making sure the children were safe. And the children went to the side of one of the caves, and a bear came in and grabbed her and ate her. And so when she went back to work, she said to the boss, that knife they took out of my back had your name on it. She said, I was able to stand up to him for the first time. And she said, my whole life has changed.
So what was her boss's reaction? Did she say anything when she said that?
See, now that's the thing. We can't change other people, but she was able to change her way of looking at life. If I can change my way of looking at life, then things are different around me. I can't dictate what other people do. That's why when I take people in the Bardo to confront people who've hurt them, they can confront all they want. And I had one woman that had 2 purple pillows in the chair over there. She took the pillows and beat the bejesus out of them. I had to move them because she was hitting me with her ring. But she was very angry at this man who had killed her, who she thinks is her current husband. So they can do that cathartic. They can't change the other person. Sometimes the person is in the Bardo. They understand that they did something wrong, and they've learned from that, and they will apologize. But sometimes they're not that far along. They haven't learned that. Everybody has to learn. And the way modern religions do it is, you're going to be punished, you're going to be punished. This doesn't work like that. It's like, this is a recipe. We're making souffle. If it doesn't turn out today, let's try it again tomorrow, and you need to do this and this and this. It's much more like that than it is any kind of punishment. And as far as I can see from what I've seen, and I'm only giving you my opinion, there's an enormous amount of mercy. And it's a learning experience. And from life to life, we learn different things. And obviously, the husband who had killed her in that past life, who she beat with the pillows, is her current husband. And she says he's a dream. He's a wonderful guy. He learned. He's not doing that again. So that's the cathartic part. When you change how you are, it changes everything around you. Because the only thing we can change, the only person we can change is ourselves.
Yes, yes. So in the afterlife, you said we meet people who have died, and these people have not reincarnated, have not.
Well, the Bardo was like a giant waiting room in the sky. The universe and what's outside of us, outside the 5 senses, is much more complex than what we have here. What we have here is the simple version. And there's a piece of all of us in the Bardo, as well as some people have reincarnated. So yes, say your grandmother had reincarnated, but there's always a piece of her there, and she's always waiting to greet you.
I see.
So, because remember, it's spirit. So
Yes.
Spirit doesn't have boundaries.
So when she reincarnates and the reincarnated person dies, that piece of her will
Her
meet the old
soul.
piece of her.
The soul.
Would they reunite, or would they be 2 separate pieces? How does that
If
work?
she goes to the Bardo, yes, they're together. They're together. It's inside. Let me explain it
But
a little
in other words,
bit more.
do you reincarnate? Are you multiple spirits?
No, no,
You're
no.
one spirit always.
Your
So a piece of
soul.
you remains behind as you. So a piece of me is behind now.
Yes, a
As I
piece of you is
reincarnate
there.
Peter here.
Yes, yes. When you came back as Peter, you had some memory of your past life. Children quite often have memories of their past lives. And so if you look on the YouTube, Ian Stevenson is the one who started this. He was head of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia Medical School. His successor is Jim Tucker. They've got lots and lots of videos on YouTube of children they've interviewed that remember their past lives and can even take the family to where they used to live and tell them what their past life was like and meet some of the people who were there. And there's a really famous one about a young woman who was sure she was the mother to a big family in Ireland, And she went back and she's found the family, and these people are all old people, but she's their mother. And so there's a lot of really very nice stories like that out there. But let me go back to the soul. Inside each of us, you know, when you wake up in the morning and you wake up and your soul is kind of opening its eyes and looking around. Your body's still there, but your soul's kind of, and that's the part that keeps going from life to life. Our spirit, our soul is, now this is my interpretation, I'm not giving you doctrine or anything, we're all part of the universe. We're all part of God. There was a song in the 70s that I just loved. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return, like the gentle drops of rain falling on the ocean. And that's Carl Jung's view, the collective unconscious. We're all part of everything, and everything is all part of us. And when we go there, the individual spirit reunites with unconditional love, because that's what eternity is. That's what heaven is. My interpretation again, unconditional love. And when you're in unconditional love, you don't need anything else. That's why it's so hard for me to get people to come back here. I have to give them enticement to come back here. Because when they're in eternal love, they don't want to come.
Yeah.
They want to stay.
Yeah. There are a couple of scientists actually who mentioned that your consciousness is almost follows the laws of quantum mechanics. So, in other words, when you die, that part of your personality jumps out of your body and exists eternally somewhere as your personality.
There was a French writer that I used to read all the time who had a very unusual take on that. He was a scientist, and he had decided that he was going to capture that spirit essence and use it to power a car. And so he did. He captured the spirit essence, and he was using it to power the car. But everybody who rode in the car just cried and cried and cried and cried because the spirit was so sad and so upset. And there was a button that he pushed, and as soon as he pushed the button, everybody was like, "Oh wow, I feel so much better." Well, he'd released the spirit. But that's just a myth. You know, you can't really capture the spirit. The spirit is something ethereal. It's not of this world. Because the reality is, my view again, we're not of this world. We come to have a human experience so we can learn something. Like, don't kill your wife, or, you know, don't beat your children, or be kind to people, or whatever it is we've come to learn. And once we learn that, we can pass on. But that's how we have to have a human experience, a human body. That's why you were never an animal. You were always a human.
But that takes me to the next question, actually. Since humans had a start, right? We weren't always a species. We became a species something like 2 million years ago, 2.5 million years ago. So when did the first reincarnation begin?
That's a really good question. Since I wasn't there, I can't tell you. What I do know is what I've studied. And I've had people go back as far as 10,000 years. I've never had anyone go back further than that. Though I did have one woman who came and had Neanderthal feet. But what we figured out, it was not Neanderthal feet. She was in Africa, and she had caught a virus from the soil that deformed her feet. It was different. It wasn't really what she thought at first. And they tell you, as people tell me, as they go in. I go in and I want to say what I think. Well, I don't say what I think at all until we get to the Bardo. And then when they come back, they tell me what they think. And I'm just startled.
Yeah.
I'm always
so
startled.
now you mentioned, let me go now to your method of inducing people into this afterlife. So
past life.
Past life. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. So how does this work? Give me an idea.
It's really pretty simple. And remember, it's like anything else. The first time you kissed a girl, you couldn't figure out where to put your nose. Now you've got it down pretty good, right? Yeah. And so I've been doing it since '89. So to me, it's very simple. So what I do is I help people relax. And I time my sessions. People pay for my sessions by a session. They don't pay a particular amount of time. The woman who was here on Saturday came at 10 and left at 1:30 because she needed that much time. So usually we can do it in 2 to 2.5 hours. People need whatever time they need to relax. And
do they come in usually nervous? They come in nervous?
everybody
not
comes in
expecting
nervous.
what we-
Yeah, everybody comes in nervous. Some people are nervous just a little tiny bit. Other people are
Jumping,
dancing around the room.
Right.
So if they start dancing around the room, I say, just play with this for a little while.
Yes.
And this is the rain stick.
This is lovely, yeah.
And it just helps them relax. That's all it does. And then if they're having a particularly hard time, this is a singing bowl. This is for my little bag of tricks. And
Very Buddhist. So.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Tibetan, and it's a Tibetan monk's bowl. And the monks go around and they beg for their food. And what they do is it's much more basic than the Catholic Church or any church where you go and you give an offering. This is the monk will pray for you and you give him food. And that's how he eats. And when the food bowl is full, he goes home and eats. But he goes around every day, and I'm sorry, I'm losing the word. There are young women who are monks too, but that's not the right word. But at any rate, they all go around and they'll trade their prayers for food. That's how they get fed. And so this is a traditional monk's bowl, and it's just a very calming sound.
Do people close their eyes when you do this usually, or do they?
Voluntarily.
Do they go into a trance eventually? Or something?
No.
They
It's
don't
not a
go into
trance. No, they're awake and aware the whole time. They lay on the sofa, and I talk them through a series of very simple exercises. Tighten up all the muscles in your arms and your shoulders. Tighten up, tight, hold, and feel the relaxation when you let go. And I get them to do that for their whole body. They relax. And then I tell them, you spent a lot of time and money and effort getting here. The sign is on the door. The telephone is turned off. You're recording this whole session. And it's up to you now. You need to use your active imagination, and we're going to go across a bridge. There's several ways I can do it, but you were mentioning the Rainbow Bridge.
Rainbow, yeah.
Yeah. So I say, just pick any bridge you like. Whatever bridge comes into your mind, that's the bridge. And start walking across the bridge. Notice that the bridge is sturdy, and you're going to make it across just fine. Now notice what the bridge is crossing over. And walk across the bridge. And when you get to the other side of the bridge, step off the bridge and look down and see your feet. And they've got their eyes closed, and they look down and they see their feet, and they're going to pass out. I'm absolutely amazed how 99% of them go. Once in a while, I'll have somebody who has a little trouble. So they say, okay, get up, go to the bathroom, come on back, we'll start again. And then I do another type of induction. It's called Round the World. So you see a spinning globe ahead of you. And you can easily see the different countries, and you can see as it turns. And one of them will call out to you. I had a woman who came who loved Ireland. She'd been traveling there several times, and it didn't work to do the cross the bridge. So I said, turn it. She was on the cliffs of Moher in Ireland as soon as she came down. And she was a young boy who had grown up there, and he was just getting ready to go to Australia for a new job. He was 14, and that's when they all went at that time. It was a long time ago. And so he went to Australia and had this wonderful life. But there he was on the cliffs of Moher. So, you know. And they just go in. It's really not that hard. It's like anything else. After you do it a couple of times, I'm kind of used to what their fears are and what their objections might be. And we cover them before we even have them lay down.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here.
Okay,
so I just want to thank you so much for having us in your
yeah.
lovely office.
Thank you very much for coming. This has
such a
been a
wonderful,
delight.
delightful to meet you too,
Yeah.
Susan DameGreene.
Yeah.
And
I'd like to say that if anybody wants to come, if they mention this video, they can have a 20% discount.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, so.
And thank you for joining us. Good night.